So sometimes I have a lot of difficulty finding like a rhythm that feels otherworldly enough. Maybe that's not the right adjective. Um, but still sounds good to us.
Welcome to Conlanging, the podcast about constructed languages and the people who create them. I'm George Corley, and with me today is ZeWei, a
Hey,
YouTube creator, musician, and conlanger out in California. How are you doing?
I am doing all right. How are you doing?
Good. So I brought you on because I had noticed your channel, and not all of your stuff is conlang, but it seems
Yeah,
like increasingly you've incorporated conlanging into your songs.
yeah, yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about like how you came to that decision, how you came into conlanging and how
Mm.
it blends into your music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I definitely am increasing the conlang content. I have plans to do that over the next year. Mostly just going to be focusing on the conlang stuff. Obviously, the music on top of it. Conlang music. That's what I'm doing. Um, yeah, yeah. I had kind of been interested in both conlangs and music for a long time, like separately. It was only a couple years ago when I like actually found the conlang community and this thing called conlanging. Like I didn't know it was a thing for ages. Um, that I thought, hey, I have these like a bunch of these language projects lying around, and I have this. I like making music, and I might as well just slap those things together because it gives me
Mhm.
something to use these conlangs for. Because I'm not writing a book or anything.
Yeah. I mean, so how did you get into conlanging in the first place?
Mm.
Like where was your path to getting into that?
Yeah, I would say it's a bunch of overlapping things that kind of eventually built up into the path that I have. So when I want to say it was like 10 years old, me and my friend, we were like, oh, let's make a language. Like this was a crazy idea. We're gonna make a language so that the adults can't understand what we're saying, and so that was like, it was just a relax of English in terms of grammar and stuff. And she and I had done it for like 2 days and then kind of dropped off. But for a while, I would think about it and be like, oh, that was a cool idea that we had. Like, I want to do that again at some point. And then, excuse me, I was playing Splatoon. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Splatoon series.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it came out in 2015. It's been 9 years now, which is crazy. The game features a lot of world building in like there's so much language everywhere. There's no functional conlang in there,
Mhm.
but there's so much writing around, graffiti on the walls and the billboards, on ads on the TV screens in there. Brands for like the clothing you can buy all have that writing on it. There's a lot of music in the game in their like global gibberish squid speak. Uh,
Mhm.
so that was um, so that was really inspiring to me, especially as someone who was working on learning indie game dev. I was like, oh well, I need to make music, um, and I need to make this game, and I have these conlangs that are lying around, so I can incorporate that idea that my friend and I had into a game that I have made to make the world feel like a lot more alive, I guess. So that's where the conlanging came in, and then eventually the music as well.
I think there are a lot of people who come into conlanging having played with language in interesting ways very young.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's interesting that it seems like you were doing some conlanging stuff before you were aware of the community then,
Yeah, I didn't know the
which
term
is
conlanging was a thing.
yeah, you were just inventing a language. That's
Yeah.
um, but tell me about your journey with the game development, are you
Mm-hmm.
still working on developing a game, or are
Mm.
you shifted mostly just to music?
As of about a year ago, I've mostly just shifted to the music and the video stuff. Previously, I had gone to college for game development. I worked on Rocket League, if you're familiar with that game.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and it was kind of a passion that I had for a very long time, and I still do. But making a game is complicated, and it takes a long, long time.
Uh-huh.
So I've had a ton of like game ideas that I've wanted to do, and I've made a bunch of stuff. And of course, in college, I was working on game projects all the time. But at the moment, I've kind of realized like I I'm a one bird show over here. I can't I can't do it all in a timely manner, at least. So the music and the conlangs was a way for me to keep making stuff while still like I have an idea, I can finish it in a timely manner. And I can
Yeah,
get it
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So currently, I'm not doing the game stuff at the moment, but I would love to go back.
That is the thing, is that it's an entirely different sort of problem.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I keep telling David Peterson is
Mm-hmm.
making these languages for a board game. I keep
Mm-hmm.
asking him, when is the board game coming out? And he's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. These things take years to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I'm sure a video game is the same kind of thing. You just have endless
Mm-hmm.
work on noodly little rules to figure out, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
but it is interesting to hear that you got this pipeline from like game dev to music to conlang music.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about now. I have interviewed other people who do like combine music and conlanging.
Mm-hmm.
Yours is a different genre than what I have encountered before. So like
Mm-hmm.
Margaret Ransdell Green, she created
Mm-hmm.
whole music theory systems for her con cultures. Um, Jasper Charlet did a chamber opera,
Yeah.
and um you are doing like electronic music.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know fine genres there, but
I don't know what to classify my stuff as either. Honestly, like some people ask, they're like, "Oh, what genre is this?" I'm like, "You tell me." I don't know.
I mean, it's definitely under the broad category of
Yeah.
electronic music.
Yeah, it's broadly computer music.
You're doing some very interesting things with. I saw one of your shorts you talking about how you built. It seems like at the base of it's just like a basic arpeggio,
Oh,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
with all the effects added to it,
Mm-hmm.
the pattern does not repeat for the entire 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. It's some experimental stuff going on. Actually, is that experimental nature in your music at all linked to your interest in including conlangs in it? Especially since like your conlangs seem to be set in sort of a sci-fi multiverse where you're shifting to other dimensions and meeting aliens that speak these
Right.
languages, right?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of them are more advanced technologically. Um, I would say I think some of the experimental music stuff and the experimental like conlang stuff, I guess, is intentional. Some of it is kind of just me being drawn to the weird stuff. Um, I've always enjoyed when something's kind of breaking the norm, convention and things. So I think inherently that's led me to do that kind of thing with a conlang and with music. But of course, I do if I'm working on conlang music, I will consider that and how that can kind of affect the music of the culture and stuff.
Do you find when you are making music with your languages,
Mhm.
do you find like different kinds of melodies
Mm.
and different kinds of rhythms fit better with certain languages or others, or do you construct features of the languages in order to like fit to particular musical styles?
I definitely do the conlang first. So the language
Mm-hmm.
and the world are like that's the first thing that I'm thinking about, and then I'll make music for it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in terms of like the melodies and stuff, I think it really depends on the language. Like if you like have a stress timed language, like that'll totally change how the rhythm works and
Right.
things. Or if you had a tone registers or contours, like that might change things too. If the culture respects them in music, because some contour languages just completely throw them out the window if you're
Yeah,
writing a
yeah.
melody, right? So it can really be anything. I often find that, like, especially when I'm working with languages with like a stress time system or a long vowels, that
Mm-hmm.
really changes how the melody needs to go,
Right,
really. And
right, right.
so if I have a melody that I've made like beforehand and then I need to like insert lyrics onto, it's a lot harder if I have like long vowels, because I need to make sure that those longer notes fit in with the longer vowels and the shorter notes fit in with the shorter vowels. And
Yeah.
sometimes they don't. And
Yeah.
we just have to deal with it. But yeah, definitely
Yeah.
influences a lot.
Syllable weight is definitely like a thing that
Hmm.
gets into it. Because like even with like English with the weight variation, you
Yeah,
see
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
happen in melodies in English, and if you see translations, there's all kinds of things. Other languages might actually add extra
yeah.
beats for extra syllables where English would have one syllable, and it's just because of the structure. I
True, that
think
is a thing
about
in
that
English as
because
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but like I just use English as an example to illustrate your point. But like I also find that like the reason I'm thinking about that is like in real languages you see
Mhm.
this kind of thing. I find that I always feel like Mandarin Chinese is very versatile actually
Mm.
in what it can
Mhm.
do because
Yeah.
you tend there is actually length variation, but you kind of ignore it and not have a problem. And and you will have like you just have to count the syllables and be good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Whereas like I've listened to Spanish rap,
Mhm.
and Spanish doesn't really work for rap.
That's a hot take.
No, I mean
Um,
like
I listen
well,
to
I
a
mean
lot of, rap italiano, but I also some Spanish too. Um,
yeah, I
and
don't know.
it is different, like,
It
just
it
the
it it
natural rhythm of the
yeah,
language
it
influences
has to
some
be
things.
different. I think that I don't listen to a whole lot of rap, but it feels like um English language rap is tending to do like an iambic rhythm, like a lot of
Mm.
English poetry,
Mhm.
and then other languages are gonna have to do something completely different.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
same way
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do something different with poetry.
Mhm.
Do you spend a lot of time actually with your languages developing poetic conventions that you
Mm.
can then take into the songwriting? Because I've watched one of your videos explaining your process, and you talked about um, rhyme,
Mhm.
and you just briefly mentioned that different cultures will define rhyme differently. But
Yeah, yeah.
like um, do you spend a lot of time on those conventions in order to figure out lyric writing?
Yeah, yeah. I probably don't spend as much time as I should, frankly. Um, that that video, I want to redo that whole video because I missed so many things in there, like the stress time and the tones.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the rhyming is one part of it. It depends on what your vowel system is. Like if you got 3 vowels or whatever, it might be easier to find rhymes, just because there's less vowels.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have, like a whole you filled up the entire vowel space and that's your phonemic vowels, like it might be easier to find slant rhymes that are more accepted
Mm-hmm.
in the culture, like E and A or something. Um, in terms of like the rhythm and the that kind of thing, like that's definitely something I think about, and it's kind of hard because it's easy to just lump everything into, oh well, that kind of sounds Englishy, because I'm
Yeah.
just so used to something inherently as like, particularly in
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if it's in 4/4 time, as well.
Right.
Um, so sometimes I have a lot of difficulty finding like a rhythm that feels otherworldly enough. Maybe that's not the right
Uh-huh.
adjective, um, but still sounds good to us. Because I don't want anything. I don't want to make music that would be like fit for this culture that like we wouldn't like as well.
Right. Well, that is a thing. Realistically,
Yeah.
if you're talking about alien music, they could definitely have different instincts that
Hmm.
drive them
Yeah.
to completely different musical structures that would not sound, maybe we couldn't even hear it
That's what.
or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like,
Exactly. That's
you
like
know.
they probably have a completely different range of frequencies that they can hear.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I've kind of accepted it as this is an interpretation of what it would sound like to them, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because otherwise, it's just not going to sound good to us, and frankly, we are the audience, so I want to make sure that it sounds listenable by any
Yeah.
means.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, your music is great. It's not always,
Oh, thank you.
you know, it's not the thing that I usually listen to, but it's really it's very interesting, very cool to like pop on.
Oh, thank you.
Let's actually listen. So you sent me, this is a little sneak peek of something that should be coming up.
Yeah.
And I'm going to jump to a part where we have some vocals so we can hear.
Pagniej na papej den hei Geken gekei jakei Pagwin ja hei Pegin jem zag kugin Play petje jem krun sengen Vach rainim Krimini senjem ni gragim Kririn ja ni seni vuggekeimim Jum je geen na geen me geen jak mee macht Paradise keep bij jachvin Graag jum geen niet babam Krune veda geen na say
That's interesting. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because there was some things I wanted to talk about that I heard later on here.
Café, partij griming isan Heb zat ik liedje te vie Pagvie gekei, pagben je me niet Je ne peper partij na pipegre Verne wie geen jem ja Heb zat de pini de glieder ka Ben mu pagpen je jumi pagtje Sei pech sasse de er kleka Jab de tu sas piqué Jab dag ik raak de shen heen Neki se kliva ni banka shapr ni rasach de bezig
Yeah. So I wanted to get that section too, but because like me, just all I can really get is phonology from here, but
Right.
listening to that, I can say you're not afraid of like going out into more unusual
Mm. Mhm.
things and things that might be challenging for you to pronounce, because
Yeah.
I hear a lot of the vowel in there, but I also hear it sounds like you have a syllabic uvular fricative. Is that right?
Yes. It's like somewhere velar or uvular,
Yeah.
depending on the speaker and the context. But yeah, it's a syllabic velar or uvular fricative. It only occurs between voiceless consonants, or y, r, and ng become devoiced, so to allow that to occur between those as well. Yeah, it's a little strange, but it came from the vocalization of mantises. I was looking at that, and they make something that sounds similar to a velar fricative. At least it sounded like something velar
Oh,
uvular.
okay. So this is for the mantis like aliens. So that's interesting. So you actually like listen to mantis vocalizations in order to
Vocalization
get it
singular.
inspiration. They have one vocalization.
At least that's what I was able to find, but this was also several years ago, and honestly, I probably should have done a little more research before I made that whole thing. But no, I mean, I did do a little bit of research for sure, and like their oral anatomy and whatnot.
Yeah, that is interesting. I kind of assume that you're sort of transcoding like whatever their physiology for producing sound is into human sounds in a way, right?
Yeah, it's an approximation.
Yeah, it's not gonna be exactly, but or in a way it's art. You're just getting a vibe for something, right?
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, it is interesting to I just feel like singing with those, if you don't speak a language that has them, because there are human languages that have these. If you don't speak a language that has those syllabic fricatives like that, I can imagine that being challenging to sing, because you're going to lose the pitch, and also you have to be very fluid in actually producing it. Do you do a lot of practice before you record, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I would not consider myself a singer to start off with that one. It's a lot of recording the same thing many times, and eventually getting something that sounds decent enough. Thankfully, with the medium that I use, all I need is one good take, and I can enter things a little bit here and there if I need to.
Right.
In terms of the pitch of the syllabic fricatives, or the lack of pitch, I should say. Yeah, that's another thing that I've had to think about, like with the melody and such. Like I can't have a really cool sounding high note on that one, because I have to say something like which does not have a tone on it.
Yeah. So you do. So it'll figure into the melody a little bit, huh?
Yeah. I have to think about it where I place that.
Yeah, it is another interesting thing in your like process video you were talking about is like you were saying, if you don't have the word you need, sometimes you can just coin it. And
it's super convenient.
which is kind of it's helpful. I have to do a little bit of poetry for my project, where I'm making spell incantations, and for some of the longer ones I want to do like couplets, or like a 4-line poem or something, right? If you have a long enough casting time. But I actually try to avoid coining new words just to fit in. Just because like I feel like I'm cheating.
You are. That's because you are, really.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I have this word that I or I should say this meaning that I want to put in here, and say I'm missing the verb or something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, well, the melody needs like 2 syllables, two rhythmic beats or whatever. Like, okay, I'll just try to find a derivation that obviously, of course, makes sense. Like I prioritize the fact that the derivation makes sense and stuff, and then I will evolve it and I'll see how that feels. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like it fits. I'm definitely like I definitely prioritize it being realistic when I'm coining new words, when I'm making the lyrics over, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good,
Yeah.
so it'll just work.
And like, how much like documentation do you have on these languages, and
Hmm.
how much development do you have? I mean, I clearly, from what I have seen, you clearly are definitely not. You're not doing relexes here. Definitely, you're
No.
doing full on grammar stuff. But I just want to know, like, how much do you develop the languages beyond what's needed for a
Mhm.
particular song, or what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah. Honestly, I develop the languages as much as possible. In a sense, the music is a bit of an afterthought. Because I'm like, wow, I've made this whole thing. Oh, what am I gonna do with it? So
Uh-huh.
I'll make music with it. Um, I the language for the Mantis people that we were just talking about. That's kind of my baby. I've been working on that since I think 2021. It was my first like big conlang project that I felt was up to
Mhm.
at least some standards that I now set for myself. Um, so I have like a whole. It's a massive spreadsheet of documentation for me. I'm currently working on getting like actual public documentation that doesn't suck um, up like I
Yeah.
currently have for the one in my Cursed Conlang video.
That's really cool. Um, I want to switch tracks really quick.
Mhm.
Um, because you, in some of your earlier stuff that was before you leaned into the conlanging aspect a lot,
Mhm.
you had a lot of songs that were talking about well, you had a few songs that were talking about queer identity.
Mhm.
And um how has that been important in your music, and has that affected how you approached conlanging? And are there things about that in the more conlang centric music as
Mm.
well?
That's a great question. Probably not intentionally. I did, like there, I could probably make some like connections of like, oh, it was because of this and this kind of broad semantic word. But honestly, I mean, they're kind of separate things. I make music to make music a lot of time, and sometimes
Hmm.
I have an idea of like, oh, I'll release some kind of album on Pride Month that's like based on the colors of the rainbow, and it's about my experience being LGBT. And I'm like, how can I fit a conlang in there? That wouldn't make sense. So I just didn't. Yeah, no, it's not really related. And I think in a way, like I kind of like that freedom that I can write music in English or Japanese or something else without having like that expectation of like, oh, their next song is gonna be in a conlang and it better be. Um, but
Right, right.
but I definitely like am now starting to focus on the conlang stuff because one, because I enjoy it, and two, people seem to like it, and that's cool.
Well, I mean, eh, the business of being on YouTube, you got to have a gimmick too. So, but
Yeah, yeah, I have
it,
a bit of a niche.
yeah, the reason I asked that question
Mm,
particularly is like, a lot of my audience is queer. A lot
that's
of
true. Yeah,
people in
yeah,
the community are queer.
yeah, yeah.
I ran a conlang relay this year on YouTube, and
Yeah, yeah, I saw that.
like, so And like this, maybe I'm a little too old and I didn't think about this beforehand, but I realized I had to add a pronouns column in my spreadsheet so I could keep track of
Oh
everybody's
yeah.
pronouns and not make mistakes. But like, just, it was not like totally deliberate in who I contacted. In
Hmm.
fact, there were people I didn't realize, but there are quite a few trans people in that playlist.
Yeah.
Um, and um, trans and non-binary people in that playlist, and it's just that's how the community is, and it kind of it's kind of, you know, because of who gets higher in algorithms, you're not necessarily going to see that on YouTube itself. If you go into like Reddit and the Discord communities, you'll find lots of
Hmm.
people, of course, but you
Yeah.
know, some of the more prominent voices, including me, are not necessarily representative of the community in that
Mm-hmm.
way.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to voice that.
Yeah. 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 I've definitely seen a lot of queer people in the community. Honestly, I'm not super involved in the community. Like I try to keep up.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
at least like from what I see it, like the queer presence is very strong. Um,
right.
and if I was smarter, I maybe would try and make some kind of correlation, but I'm I'm not gonna pull something out there that I'm not confident in.
Hmm.
But it is really cool to see like that community for people who are marginalized in that sense.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be a voice in that, I suppose.
Yeah. But well, anyway, let's moving back into like your conlanging.
Mhm.
I really, now I'm not sure if it, the Cursed Conlang Circus may be completely over by the time I
Maybe.
I get this out, because we're recording this earlier, folks, but I do not have a whole lot of time to do editing, and I also like want to give space to some other things. But this should come out like first of the year. But I saw your entry in particular,
Mhm.
and it was really interesting. It was one thing that I was already like checking out your music and
Oh, thank you.
being and interested in interviewing you, but like that particular idea with the like very amped up, like over the top politeness system
Yeah.
with so many different layers, like historical layers to it, was very impressive to me.
Oh,
And
thank you.
um, could you tell me, like, where did you get the idea for that?
Mm.
And like, the whole story for it, and
Mhm.
also like the way that you developed with the history of the language and the differing levels of formality
Mhm.
and 600 pronouns.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually don't know what the real number is. It's definitely over 600. Um, and that's like not counting the case forms of each of them. Um, yeah, so I had I had the idea for that language, I want to say like a year and a half beforehand, and by that I mean I had a shell of it. Like it was like I had the idea of, oh, I would like to make a language with a Polynesian style type phonology, and it's polysynthetic. And I made like a beta version of the syllabary for it, and then it kind of collected dust for a while. Um, and I wanted to join the Cursed Conlang Circus. So eventually that got announced. I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? I need to figure out what I'm doing. Um, and I had always wanted to do a conlang showcase, but I never really did. Something about it just didn't feel right. I wanted to do something different, something interesting. So the theme for well, one of the themes was tell a story in there, and I was like, that's how I can do it, because I wanted to do it somehow diegetically rather than like omnipotent god explaining how the whole region and all the languages work in there. So I ended up thinking about like how can I make something that would work still like a conlang showcase, but incorporate the language and the world into some kind of plot in quotes.
Right.
And so I ended up coming with I had this shell of a language that I had made before, and I was like, oh cool, I'll develop that for this. And it turned into the whole formality thing when I was thinking of, oh well, what if I was given the basics of the language, and then turns out that was the informal version and I've been rude to them the whole time. And then that kind of snowballs as it does.
Yeah.
As it does. And I kind of kept thinking about like how can I take this formality thing like to the extreme while still being naturalistic. Naturalism is something that I really enjoy, and I haven't seen a ton of conlangs that would go in the cursed category that's like inherently naturalistic. So I wanted to do something like that. So I thought about formality and like relationships and things. So that's where I came up with the relationship forms for each of the names. Came from Japanese, akachan, akakun, senpai, all of those kind of endings. And I was like, well, how can I push this to the extreme? And that's when I thought about, oh, I can include that as part of the other things, and that's where the etymology of them, all of those verb forms and adjectival forms came from. So it really started with the like tell a story, as something that I wanted to do for a long time. So that's I guess that's where that kind of came from.
What I'm understanding is like you had the prompt tell a story, and the idea was how can you make the language itself the conflict of the story?
Yeah.
And then from there you decide, oh, we'll do a politeness system, and that becomes like a plot point in the thing, because you know you have to actually learn the politeness system in order to interact with people.
Right.
And then you make it cursed by adding layers of historical cruft to it, and like way too many forms to memorize.
Oh yeah. Tons of suppletion. All of those things, all with the CV structure, normal quote normal phonology. And because like I had an idea of building on that with like, oh, you know, what if I've gotten this far, but I've called this person the wrong form of their name, and then I'm back to square one of like, well, I don't know anything anymore.
That was a great thing about that video, is that it just like keeps going. It's like at first it's like, okay, you get these notes from the Chinese researchers, and then you go to that dimension and you find out, well, the sounds are a little bit different because they're tree people, but we'll just represent it this way. And then, well, actually I've been using informal forms the whole time, and I need to learn the correct forms in order to not offend people constantly. And then from there it's like, oh, okay, there's like this like historical underlayer to the politeness registers, and then there's some words that are always polite, always important, and then goes into, oh, and then these cyborg trees have a completely different register that cannot be understood by humans. It just keeps going and going and snowballing. And I think that makes the story even better.
Part of the idea was I want to make something that you have to keep going through different layers in order to get to the right meaning, and that's where the idioms came from as well. Because I wanted to kind of obscure meaning as much as possible while somehow staying, quote, naturalistic.
Yeah.
So we had all the different forms and everything, plus the polysynthesis of everything, plus all the idioms. Well, I go through the steps. That's where that came from in the video.
Yeah.
So,
And like, you say you don't actually know how many pronouns there are.
I
Like,
don't.
is there like, is it an open class of pronouns and you just like haven't made all of them?
I just haven't made all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've counted. There has to be at least 600. I've
Mhm.
made. Actually, I don't know how many I've made. You can look on the Lakati Portal's website /78h in the pronouns section, and I've made all of the pronouns relative to the first and the second person. All of the
Mhm.
pronouns relative to the third person, I haven't made yet because I mean, we haven't done enough research on those yet to uh, to put them down in the graph yet, because they take so long. Because I have to historically evolve each of them and think
Oh,
about their
okay.
evolution of all those things and add suppletion and add those exceptions and things. And I'm like, well, is this a homonym of anything? It's a homonym of this word. Okay, what is this? um, lots of steps. So there's at least 600. I've done the math to figure that out at least.
Yeah. Another thing about your work that I find interesting is you have a particular way of going about constructing scripts. In that
Hmm,
you basically you you say that you basically take a font and you just like change some
modify it.
things,
Yeah,
delete some things, modify some things.
yeah, yeah.
Can you talk about like how did you come up to that idea for
Mm-hmm.
making your scripts?
Yeah, yeah. Not all of mine are. Two of the languages in my next video are going to be like fully like I drew that, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But uh, so I was doing that for a little bit. I was working. I use Bird Font, which is a font program. It's free, which is
Mhm.
incredible. Um, and like that was all fine and good, and I was doing that, and it was fine. But I found that I'm not a vector artist by any
Uh-huh.
means. I can draw like a handwritten font in Photoshop and then convert it to vectors. But if I wanted something that was a little more techy per se,
Uh-huh.
like the font in Ouya, you don't you can't just like write that out in Photoshop. That's not going to look uh, techy enough, at least in my experience. So I was like, well, Bird Font allows me to import fonts to just look at and edit and do whatever I want with. Um, so I, went on Google Fonts, fonts that are free for commercial and personal use, I should say. And you look at their license and stuff, and they're like you can modify this font and use it however you want. So I've been doing that. It's a lot easier for me because I'm like I said, I'm not a vector artist. Um, and honestly, like the fonts are so mangled to a point where like I had
Yeah.
a couple of people find the original font for Ouya, and they were like, "This feels so weird looking at it in English because it just feels so different."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like I imagine like you are finding you're finding characters that
Oh yeah.
are approximately what you want and modifying them, but
Mhm,
like the underlying system is like a fully realized conscript that you
mhm.
that is built for that language, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I make the script beforehand. Like I scribble it out in Photoshop. I'm like, okay, this is this syllabic character or whatever, this
Mhm.
shape because it came from this logogram or whatever the history is behind that. And then I take that shape that I've decided is going to be the letter, the glyph is the correct term. Um, and then I look at the font and all of the glyphs that are available to me in the font, and I say, okay, which one of these can I modify the easiest to look like what I want it to look like? Generally, I'm able to get it close enough, with sometimes with a lot of of modification. Um, but yeah, it always starts with like, this is what I want it to look like because this is where it historically came from, and then I modify stuff to make it look like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean that it's if it's a process that works, and
Yeah.
that I did not know that piece of it. So you are like doing the work of even
Mhm.
drawing it out and
Yeah.
doing the historical development of it, but then you take an existing font and you find something that you can turn into the character you already drew.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
an interesting way to go about it, and
Yeah.
something that, maybe some other conlangers out there might want to do something similar. This
Mhm.
can be an inspiration for people who want to get into making scripts but are not as confident about free drawing
Yeah.
in SVG programs. I know that I have some I first time in a long time doing a script. I did scripts earlier on, but let's not talk about that too much. But like for Ndakaga, like I intentionally was choosing something where I would have limited like strokes
Yeah.
that were easy to create in order to make that first script. Next one is for Faye. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna be able to do that kind of thing for myself.
That sounds
So
squiggly.
I'm gonna have to think about what kind of aesthetic I'm gonna do for that. But yeah, depending on what you want, that seems like it can be an effective like method for doing it. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting, and it's a different process than what I have seen other people do, which is,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great thing to highlight, because there are many different ways to do conlanging. Like, it seems like you do some historical development.
Yeah.
Do you do like historical method for conlanging?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
honestly, that's like probably my favorite part is like
Yeah.
making a proto language and then trying to see how I can get
Yeah.
it to evolve in different ways. It's really fun.
Yeah. But yeah, so a lot of people do that. Not everybody, but yeah. Um and it's interesting to see different ways of doing things. You did say, you have said um in before that you tend to write your melodies first and then lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so when you are writing the melody, are you already thinking about, though, what kinds of melodic structures work best for the language you're going to put to it?
Mm. Generally, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will think about like certain uh word patterns. Like if I have a language that's the stress is always at the end of the word, or like the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
syllable in the word, I should say. So I think about the melody and I'm like, okay, well, if I want this kind of melody to sound like this in this language, I need to make sure that I have words that will fit in that structure. So it's a little bit of back and forth sometimes, but for the
Yeah.
most part, I do the melody first with that at least broadly in mind. I It's a lot easier to get something sounding musical than it is to get something that sounds like I have a text that I've already written and I need to put it to some kind of melody. At least in my workflow, it's easier to have the melody first and then
Yeah.
get stuff that fits.
Yeah. So and then you can sort of write the lyrics to match it. But that is interesting. Sort of, I can imagine you talked earlier about if you have differences in vowel lengths, differences in syllable weight,
Yeah.
that can affect, like, you need to put some longer duration notes into there for on those syllables. Or if you've got, I imagine, like, initial stress versus final stress, that would affect where you would put an accent in a line.
Yeah.
Right. Or
where
things
it
like
would
that.
go
Yeah.
in the rhythm. If it's an on beat, then that's gonna sound more stressed, even if it's said with equal stress. It being on an on beat will feel more stressed because of how we interpret rhythm and stuff. So
yeah, that's music theory on conlanging here.
music theory.
But it is very interesting. Do you? So I mean, you kind of mentioned, like, you want it to sound nice to humans, but do you actually think about, like, whether these aliens have any differences in their own conception of music theory that would make it into your music?
Yeah. So you were talking earlier about the cyborg register in Oiyaya. That video, I talk about the 7-tone pitch system that's in there. So normally in music theory, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 notes per octave, and that's just the standard for Western music. But it's not entirely an arbitrary number. I'm trying to put this back. It's not entirely an arbitrary number, but really, I mean, cultures can come up with any ways to divide the octave. So 7 just made sense for them. They have base 8. So all of their music is in this 7-tone system, so they only have 7 tones per octave instead of the 12 that we do. So it might sound a little weird and wonky to us.
So it's 7 and not 8?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh. So it's like less than, so it hits the octave at the 7th one?
It hits the octave at the 8th one.
Oh, okay.
So it's like A, B, C, D, E, F. Wait, yeah, E, F, A.
Okay.
But it's not those notes in the way that we would know them.
Okay, it is, but it's different than, but it's different from a diatonic scale.
Let me Google diatonic scale.
It's different from a major or minor scale.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In a sense, yes. Because it's just those 7 notes. There's no, like, divisions of it. As you can see, I am very well versed in music theory.
No,
but yeah, no, it is different.
Yeah. So that is interesting. Right. So there's like a little bit of a difference in how they construct a scale.
Yeah.
And so that by itself can work differently.
Yeah.
I was just interested because you can have, I mean, there's lots of different scales in the real world, in our own various different cultures. There are different ideas about rhythm. There tend to be some universals that I think probably would carry over, but there's a lot of variation, right?
Yeah, I try to get that balance. The song that we were playing earlier is a good example of the rhythm thing. That's in the it's like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 4, and that pattern continues, which isn't very conventional in this dimension. Yeah, so I figured that would be another example to pull out real quick.
Right. So 1 2 3 4.
It's 15.
Yeah,
if you're
15,
counting them.
So it's like a 15 16 like thing. And then
it can be interpreted as 15 16 sort of, but it's more like 4 beats, 4 beats, 3 beats, 4 beats.
Okay.
But it can also be interpreted as 5 beats of 3/4 or 3 beats of 5/4, depending on how the song is kind of structured rhythmically.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that kind of makes it sound, at least like that 3/4 part makes it sound not as odd to us, but then still hits you with like, oh, and you
Yeah.
get that little otherworldly feel in there.
Yeah. That is interesting to just throw that in, like a slightly different rhythmic structure that I don't think that's super common to take out that particular way
If it
in
is, I've not
the
heard of
world.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's well, it's been interesting talking to you, and uh again, we're recording this beforehand. I don't know what the result of
Yeah.
the Cursed Conlang Circus is going to be, but
Hello, future.
good luck on that part. And good luck with your channel.
Oh, thank you.
It seems like it's doing very well right now. Um,
It's
but
getting there.
it's it's a process.
Yeah.
It takes a while.
Yeah.
But it's it was really great to talk to you
Yeah. It was great seeing you.
and about your music and about how you fit conlangs into it. Um, any last thoughts you have? Anything you want to point people to?
Anything I want to point people to? Let's see. I've got a new video coming. I guess I will. Yeah, I'll talk about this. I got a new video coming out probably February. I'm not sure yet. By the time this video comes out, hopefully I will be more sure. But it will be a continuation of the same kind of format that I did in the Cursed Conlang Circus video. I'm making that into a series, and I'm gonna have a bunch of music that comes out with each episode. At least that's the plan right now. So keep an eye out for that. I'm working on a lot of stuff, a lot of music, lots of conlang
Are
stuff.
we gonna have more of you as your bird avatar shifting to different dimensions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm hoping that there will be an overarching plot. That is kind of the plan right now. I'm working on something for that. But we'll see. That's currently in the works.
That's great. Well, any final thoughts for everyone out there? Any advice you have to other conlangs? Maybe advice to other musicians who want to write conlang music.
Yeah. Advice. If you want to make something, like, Google it. Search it up on YouTube or something. Like, chances are there's gonna be something out there for it. Because like I didn't know conlanging was like a thing until after like 10 years or whatever, actually searched it up and found so much stuff, and now I'm making stuff that I wouldn't have thought to make before. So there's the whole internet of resources out there as long as you have an internet connection. So if you want to make something, search it up. Someone's probably already taught you how.
Yeah, that's definitely my take on things. Or maybe sometimes things come to you, because
Yeah.
I started making some of my own music a little bit. I just do instrumental stuff. I haven't done conlang stuff with it.
Yeah, I've heard it. Sounds great.
Yeah. But that was just from me getting suggested music theory videos on YouTube, and then going down a rabbit hole, and I'm like, I'm just gonna write some stuff.
Yeah. It's fun. I'm always making stuff.
Yeah. But that's really good advice. And thank you, ZeWei, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Go to find ZeWei on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll have the channel like added there. But yeah, thank you for coming on, and happy
Thank you for having
conlanging.
me. Happy conlanging.
Special thanks to my patrons on Patreon. If you go over there right now, you can get early access to episodes. You can get access to scripts for my solo episodes, and you can go get access to exclusive polls for Tongues and Runes. Thank you to Mintaka, Kinan Kigunda, Connor Stewart Rowe, Jesse K, Alex Russell Hayes, Viren Patrick, Tabby, Alexis Hugelman, Sylvia Sotomayor, Grammar Antifa, Wuming Shuai, Rakagrunk, Sigourney Hunter, Eloivar Yana Mentuleum, Nicholas Norblad, Anthony Dosimo, Artifexian, Jake Penny, Miles Ronkovich, Paul Roser, Langworm, Our Table, Asa, Hornbori. Conlangery's theme music is by Null Device. Conlangery is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 international license.